To the February 7th, 2022 West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd ask that everybody in the room, with the exception of the Chief of Police, please silence your telephones so we're not interrupted during the meeting. I'd also like to announce that Commissioner Simmons will not be with us this evening. He's traveling. It is his birthday today, so I was feeling bad when I first got here that I was the only guy that didn't get invited to his birthday party, but all of you weren't invited either, so I feel better. So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is to approve our agenda. It has been distributed and provided. It is online, and it has been distributed in the commission room.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented for February 7, 2022. Is there any discussion?
I just like how short it is. Personally.
There'll be no debate over that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is the approval of the minutes of the January 17, 2022. They have been distributed. They're on pages 2 through 4 in the packet. Are there any questions?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 17th meeting, pages 2 through 4, as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item E is the building permits. The building permit report has been distributed. It's in pages 5 through 7.
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as distributed and presented in the package, pages 5 through 7. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda, items A through D, and it goes from pages 8 through 37. They have been distributed.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through D, as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on. We are now moving into the regular agenda. Item number 1 is the Sheyenne Street cleaning and snow removal. Commissioner Brad Olson has brought this forward. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. It just came to light last week, and I know it probably should have been before, but I've noticed a lot of overnight parking on Sheyenne Street, and our street crews haven't had a chance to really get in there and clean it out like we'd like to. So what I would like to have the consensus or approval of the commission, so it's all out there, that we do something similar to the city of Fargo and declare a certain segment of downtown from Main Avenue down to 7th Avenue. No parking on a certain night, just for now to clean it up. Maybe in the future, when we get a big snowstorm, you know, so many inches of snow that we do this more on a periodic thing, but this would help clean up, you know, the snow piles that have been there, and now with the weather we've got coming right now, don't want to jinx it, but if we can get rid of a lot of that snow closer to the edge of the street, it's going to clean it off more of the street because Mother Nature will help. So that's what I'm proposing. Work it out between, you know, the police department, public works, and just wanted to get your thoughts and ideas on such a proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think it makes sense.
Makes total sense to me. Is there anything that's required, Mr. Shockley, as we move forward on this, that, you know, we have the Public Works Street Department has the authority to declare those types of things and/or post signage with regard to that?
Yes, Mr. Commission President, there's a resolution currently in place that sets forth which streets get cleaned when and where. So you just need a motion to amend that resolution, add in whatever dates and times need to be added into that resolution for the cleaning of Sheyenne Street.
If we pass a resolution this evening with regard to the concerns that Commissioner Olson has, can we leave the specific day and/or times open until we have time to consult with Matt and Dan over at Public Works, and they determine that specifics? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, what I could suggest is you could do that tonight. When the specifics are finalized, we'd bring back the final resolution and just vote on it again, just for transparency.
We would have to do a resolution each time we want to do this?
No,
Oh.
there's a resolution out there that sets forth which streets get cleaned when, and then police department can take appropriate action to remove vehicles. And it's just a requirement so that if you're going to ticket somebody and tow them, that it would be set forth in the resolution if we want to enforce it.
All right, thank you. Commissioner George?
I guess this might be a question for Brad. Were you thinking of this like all year round or just in the winter months, or?
Just primarily in the winter months.
Okay,
Unless there's something that pops up during the summer when we need to go in there and actually sweep the streets and things like that, and there's always cars parked in certain spots because of, you know, one reason or another.
The tenants above,
Yeah.
most of them, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, my only concern, I see the need, so I agree with you on that. My only concern is that I just foresee a lot of those overnight people parking at Morrison, so I don't want to cause undue burden to them any more than we need to. That would be my only concern, but I do agree that there is a need to do it.
Yeah.
Great point, Commissioner George. Great point.
So do we need a resolution, or do we need to wait for you to draw something up, or where do we go from here?
So what I would suggest is a motion to amend the resolution designating snow emergency routes to include Sheyenne, parts of Sheyenne Street as determined by the city administrator and Public Works, and the chief of police, ultimately bringing that back to the city commission at the next meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Jurdovic, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioner Olson.
Thank you.
Item number 2 is the second reading of ordinance number 1205, the authorization of annual appropriation bonds. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. There's been no changes between the first and second reading of this ordinance, and just once again, for public information, this ordinance merely gives the commission the authority to issue annual appropriations bonds. It's not actually issuing any debt, it's just giving you that authority. This is being done in conjunction with the possible financing of the fire station. But once again, this just gives you the authority. It's not actually issuing any debt.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions of Mr. Shockley? Okay, Commissioners.
Make motion to approve the second reading?
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. We have a motion to approve the second reading. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of ordinance number 1205, the authorization of annual appropriation bonds, as presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is the City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Tina Fisk, City Administrator, City of West Fargo.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I have a couple of quick items, and then there's a couple people that have more information that they want to come up and share with you. First of all, I had talked with all of you about the massage program ordinance that was being worked on, and after getting a consensus from you that in some form you wanted to move forward with it, I've directed John Shockley, to prepare the ordinance for the city of West Fargo, and then that will be distributed for you. Commissioner George just sent me some information that she asked me to share with all of you, and I will also share that with Mr. Shockley. So that information will come forward at another meeting as a reading. Yes?
Can I just, I want to make just one really main point on this
Please,
ordinance.
Commissioner.
Okay, and I've talked to a couple of therapists on this. So it's Article 13-18, Section 13-1805 of this ordinance. The Director of Public Health, Chief of Police, or any office of the Health or Police Department may at any time enter upon any licensed premises for the purpose of health inspection or to determine whether the licensed premises are in compliance with any and all ordinances of the city. This section shall not restrict or limit the right of entry vested in any law enforcement agency. This section is really the biggest hangup, and what they're basically saying is the police officers, without any reasonable suspicion of anything, can just walk into a massage therapist's place of business while a person's getting a massage. That's the problem. That's where the hang-up is. So I feel like there should be something that should say they can enter if there's reasonable suspicion of something, or, something in that language, where I don't think they should just be able to enter for no reason. That's my opinion, and that's what the massage therapists have been saying that I've been talking to about this.
So I understand, Commissioner George, is that our ordinance as it is presently? Or
No.
is that the suggested ordinance that is duplicating other municipalities?
That's the duplicating.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good, thank you. I wanted to make sure that,
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's not how it currently is, but that's what they're asking for, and that's the one where I think the language, if we could change even something about, like, unless there's due suspicion of something legal, I don't know how that would be worded, but you know what I mean.
but by, just so I follow your train of thought.
Yeah.
By your suggestion, it takes away the authority from the police department if they're suspicious of
Trafficking,
illegal activities
activity.
in there.
Right, if
They
there's,
don't have the right?
if there's any sort of suspicion, they should enter. That's, I think that everybody's fine with that. If there's any sort of suspicion, obviously. But the problem is with these licensed places, if there's no suspicion of unlawful activity, people have a problem with them just being able to randomly walk into their places. They might have a client, being fairly vulnerable, on a massage table, and not necessarily want a random police officer doing a random inspection at that moment in time, which this allows them to do that, which is where the hang-up is at. Because there needs to be clarifying language as far as when a police officer can enter the premises.
But,
So,
are we searching for a problem here? How many times have we had officers charge in on a massage therapist?
well, that's what this would allow them to be.
Right, but I can't imagine that would happen without, I realize that just because I can't imagine it doesn't mean that it can't happen, but
Right.
like, our police department is focused on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that we would if there wasn't some type of suspicion.
Hopefully
So I'm just
that
not
would be
sure
the
there's
case.
a problem.
Right.
I guess I don't
Yeah.
have concern with how it was written, but.
That is the people's concern. That is the massage therapist's concern in the community. They're concerned that it's giving too much access to law enforcement when there's no reasonable suspicion.
So do you feel that way about our liquor license? Because there's another establishment that we license.
You don't have
Police
naked,
can
you don't have
walk
naked
into-
people on beds in liquor license establishments.
Or, Chief, that's up to you, buddy. This is a much more interesting meeting than I thought we were going to have this evening. Mr. Shockley, do you have any comments with regard to Commissioner George's concerns?
So it is very similar to, and we haven't presented the ordinance yet for first reading, but I guess there's really two policy arguments. The first would be having that in would allow the city or the police department to enter a premises that is suspected of being human trafficking. I've worked with other communities more on the human trafficking side, and unfortunately with some businesses, you can't tell from the exterior that they're engaging in human trafficking, and it becomes very difficult to charge the people working inside the entity And so I could see there being a policy reason why you would want the same as a bar to, if you suspected something was just going on in there, and the right just to enter it without having to provide some type of reasonable suspicion, which has a basis in law. When you develop reasonable suspicion. On the other hand, I can understand that a legitimate business would be concerned about somebody just barging in when they're conducting a legitimate business. Maybe the chief and I can kind of come up with some language that might give a little balance or something in the middle.
And I'd encourage you to reach out to Commissioner George. She's had a constituent reach out to her, so to include her in part of those dialogues, if that's amenable to you.
Yeah, that would be good. I'd like to do that, actually, yeah. And coming up with a good balance, that's a great idea, yeah.
Chief, you have something that you wanted to add?
No, just that I'd be happy to work with our city attorney on that, and I think, not that it could never happen, but I suspect any of these investigations or any time that we might be doing an inspection would be complaint-driven or based on an active investigation rather than just, going out to do random inspections. So that would be, my policy within our department, but I think it's probably appropriate to have it in city ordinance as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Good.
Take care of it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue, Mrs. Fisk.
Yes, I want to give you an update on a couple of our open positions. The Economic Development Manager, that position for taking applications has closed. We received 27 applications. Of those applications, we have 4 that we will be setting up for interviews, and those will be towards the end of the month. I believe it's the 25th. And I believe Commissioner Dardis, Commissioner Jaravig, Aaron from Planning, Dustin from Engineering, myself, and Jenna. Did I miss anybody? Jenna? That will be the interview committee, so we'll be working on questions and sending those around so that you guys are aware and making sure it works for your schedule. We're working on a Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, so. We'll keep you posted. The other position, we just posted the Assistant City Administrator position, and that will remain open until the end of the month. So that one will be a little while yet. I wanted to give you an update on the West Fargo room remodel. Emily set some information in front of you. If we were to remodel that space to be used for court, it would be about $45,000. And we just needed to know if you wanted us to proceed with that or if you want us to wait.
Do you have any drawings or anything of what they're proposing?
There were drawings. I did not print them out, I'm sorry. And I know Amy's here, and she can talk a little bit about the need, if need be.
I had a
George.
comment on this one. So we're going to have our meeting coming up, I think, was it the 18th? Is it the 10th or the 18th? The 10th, I think, with the commission and the library board.
Yes, ma'am.
And things I'd like to discuss were what are the commission vision for the future. And I know at one point, having a collaborative effort between a library and City Hall was one of the items for discussion. I almost feel like, personally, I feel like I'd rather wait on this until after that meeting to see if we want to invest this kind of money, depending on what the commission decides or sees their vision going forward. That's just my thought on something to think about on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to see drawings, so I recommend that we wait until we have a better perspective of what this all involves.
Okay.
Please.
I apologize. I will forward the drawings to you along with this estimate so that you can review it.
Just to make a comment.
Please,
on
Commissioner Olson.
What Mandy had said, even, we would be a couple of years out before we would ever get to a point of doing anything with the library or a thing, so it really can't wait that long to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a valid point. Yeah.
just keep that in perspective too. Can't wait till we know what we're doing there.
Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. I will get that information to you right away and put this on the next agenda.
Thank you.
The next item is the HVAC at City Hall. As you're all aware, we have had quite a few issues. Planning and zoning is like a sauna with high humidity. Other offices are ice cold while other ones are really hot. It goes out every once in a while. The other day, it was 45 degrees, and, because the system just shut down. And some of that can happen with any system, but this is a very old system, and the problem we have is that the main part of City Hall was once a big, huge open space. And now we've put it into as many little spaces as we can, and it's causing some issues with the system. So Tony from Buildings and Grounds met with, let's see, was it, I think it's, met with Johnson Controls, and they've done all the work on our systems up to date. And they came up with 3 different options. The first one was to balance the current HVAC system, hoping that it would provide proper airflow to each of the space. The pros are it's affordable and a relatively quick fix. The cons is it doesn't solve the humidity issues that it may not completely solve in all those issues in those spaces. And by that, what I mean is, while planning and zoning is a sauna, the rest of the building is so dry that it's causing issues for some staff. And so it's something that we would want to talk about. The first option is approximately $20,000. The second option that would include a unit that wouldn't have a humidifier in it, using the existing ductwork and balancer in each room, would be approximately $100,000. The pros is it would solve the humidity issues and ensure proper heating and cooling to all spaces using current ductwork. The cons that because of material shortages, it could take a while for that to come in. And the third is a full HVAC system retrofit. That would be a full unit, full ductwork, controls, heating, cooling, humidity. It's very expensive in comparison to the others. It goes anywhere between $350,000 to $500,000. I had spoke briefly with each one of you and kind of mentioned our thoughts, and in doing that, I had neglected to look at what the recommendation was from Johnson Controls and from Tony from Buildings and Grounds. And their suggestion was to do number 2, replace the rooftop unit to solve the humidity problem and do the HVAC balancer. That was their recommendation. I just wanted to get some information from you, as it's kind of hard to know what to invest in this building and what not.
So these dollar amounts that you shared with us, Mrs. Fisk, they are guesstimates, so to speak?
They're approximate, yep, based on the fact that.
So there's not been an RFP outlining what the actual cost would be. All right. Commissioner, any questions for Mrs. Fisk?
I think the recommendation makes sense. I mean, to the point that Commissioner Olson just made, you know, first off, we don't have any other plans for a city hall or a library right now, but even if we did, it's far enough into the future to where we have to solve this problem even for the next couple of years at an absolute minimum. And so I think the recommendation makes total sense.
I agree.
So what you're looking for is authorization then from the commission for an RFP for item number 2. We have a consensus, I believe, up here for item number 2. And with maybe one caveat that if it's in excess of $100,000, you come back and discuss that with us. If you get your 3 bids or whatever.
Yes, President Dardis, I believe that the reason Tony went to Johnson Controls is because they have all of our controls in the entire building. And so they were the most cost-effective option. If you want me to have him go out and try to get other quotes, I can do that and bring that back to you, because what we would have to do in either case is they would draw up an agreement and I would bring that back to you with a price.
I feel compelled that if we're going to be spending taxpayers' dollars in the tune of 6 figures, that we ought to have local contractors that have this opportunity. If Johnson Controls is the award-winning contractor, so be it. But I do believe that we owe it to the public and to our taxpayers to do that. That's my opinion, strictly my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, I will talk with Tony tomorrow, and we will direct him to create an RFP for these options, and we will eventually bring that back to you guys.
Commissioners, if you feel differently about that, please.
Okay?
Thank you.
See, yep. And we had talked quite some time ago about some of the issues that were happening with the parking garage structure. There were not enough security cameras in there, and the security camera feeds were not all, therefore not giving enough information to the police department to be able to make sure that it was safe. And so I asked our IT department to work with the PD and to find a vendor and give us a price for security cameras in the structure on all levels to create the safety. And the estimated price is $58,000 to put that security system in.
Could you repeat the dollar amount? I wasn't sure I heard you right.
Approximately $58,000. And the reason is there's they've got to put metal tubing all around, and it's in the four deep corners of each level in order to be able to get a full view and make sure that nothing's happening within the structure. So that added some cost to it. As a safety feature, I think it is a wonderful thing that we should have had long ago. And if you do decide to proceed with this or something else, my recommendation would be to pay for it with economic development sales taxes. That is where the funding was coming from.
So there were cameras
There,
in the parking garage.
yes, there are some, but not very many. There's only just a few, and they only, I believe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but they show the entrance of the ramp. Have you seen them?
I believe that's correct, the entrance of the ramp, and then maybe the entrance is close to the elevators or the access, the skyway.
So do we have documentation of some of the issues that have transpired out there, whether it's break-ins or bad behavior up on the fourth floor, throwing things off the top? Do we know how serious this is? I know that there's been some concern, but I've not seen any documentation as to the frequency or whatever that would warrant an expenditure, you know? Does anybody have access to that type of information? Chief?
President Dardis, I could certainly come up with that documentation and present that to the commission.
I, you know, serving on the West Fargo Events Board, Commissioner Simmons and myself, we do, and I know that there's been incidents where there's been kids up there dropping bottles off there, and, you know, that's a danger and that type of thing. And if, I'd just like to know a little bit about the frequency and things like this, because I know that some of those kids have been talked to. Same with the skateboarders, they go up there and they like all that concrete, but,
I know it's a relatively common occurrence that we're out there, either proactively addressing it or receiving complaints, but I can get you the actual numbers.
It's a frequent thing that you're called out there?
Yes.
Okay, well, then that
President
kind
Dardis.
of answers my question then.
One of our main things when we were having discussions about the parking ramp quite a while back was if there was something violent to take place within the ramp, we don't have any way for the police department to be able to go back and find out what all happened. And it's our ramp and our responsibility. So as we're considering what to do, that is just something that is of great concern.
Commissioner George.
Back in college, I worked for a security company for a little while, and one of my jobs was to sit in a parking ramp and watch a door, because had been a mugging and a lady in a parking ramp in Fargo. And so they hired, security all the time just to watch this door. So I think a camera system is a good idea.
So are you available then to be a security guard here?
I prefer not to do
Okay.
that.
All right, very, very good, Commissioner. My apologies.
I think it's needed, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, we went out for bids on this. You know, whenever we're spending taxpayer money, I know that we have authorization within certain limits. I'm going to ask the question every time.
Yes, I appreciate that, President Dardis. What I did was I directed, like I said, our IT director to work with our police chief, and then he went to Network Center, which is our main vendor for our security cameras, because that's what's already in there and it would tie in. So no, there are not, but I can ask him to do
Well,
that.
That's important, that if it's compatible, obviously, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So I'll leave that in your capable hands. Thank you.
I would either need a motion to proceed or a motion to bring you more information.
I'll make the motion to proceed with the purchase of the.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve moving forward on security cameras on the parking garage located at the lights.
The actual final agreement will be coming forward to you once we get it written up, and more information on the locations as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
The only two other items I have are Chief Ordinance has some information he wants to talk with you about. Then after that, Matt Anvig from Public Works has a couple items to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just real briefly, you'll recall just over 3 months ago, we had an officer, Tim Brown, that had a major medical emergency on duty while at the Cass County Jail, and I just wanted to provide an update to you and the public that might be watching tonight that we are very happy to announce that his first shift back in full uniform as a police officer here in West Fargo is going to be tonight at 9:30. So it's been a miraculous recovery that we've all kind of been a part of at the city here, and we can't be happier to tell you that you and the public that Officer Brown is going back to work tonight. So in full duty, he's been released from his by his medical team to come back. So we're very happy to be able to report that. That's all I had for you tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Simmons and I were with you in the emergency room when this episode happened, and for Officer Brown to be walking back through with a gun belt on today and serving the public of West Fargo is an absolute miracle. I remember when the physician walked out to us and said the only recourse was to immediately air flight him to Omaha for a heart transplant, and here the man is back working for us today. So please greet Officer Brown for all of us and welcome him back.
I will.
Delighted
Thank
to
you.
hear the news. Thank you,
Thanks.
sir. Mr. Matt Anvig, Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo. Welcome.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up a little bit on new CDL, I guess, law that's going through now. That's going to make it a little bit more difficult for us to hire. Actually, effective today, the federal government requires anybody getting a CDL to basically take a theory or a study course, and then 40 hours of between 20 and 40 hours, depending on it was a Class A or B for behind the wheel training before they can get a CDL. So the schools that are in the area it's about $6,000 to send a person to one of these schools to go get training for that. So we've been working with HR and I guess different foremen in Public Works to try and figure out a way to go about this that's going to be a little bit more cost effective for the city. Over the last 2 years, we've averaged about 12 people that we've hired that had to go get CDLs. So with that cost would be quite a large sum going forward, if we continue to average that per year. So just thinking with some open positions we have this year and some retirements coming up, we're probably going to be at that 10 or 12 again this year, looking for hiring people. And then it's even going to be harder now hiring people with CDLs because trucking firms and everybody is going to be wanting to hire anybody that has one previously so they don't have to put them through this. So we've been working, reaching out to Fargo too to see what they're going to do, to see if there's ways we can work together and figure out a way to get around or get through it and not cost the city as much. So there's a few ideas that we're kind of running through yet, but hopefully in the next few weeks or something like that we could bring something forward that we've kind of thought out a little bit more clearly as a plan to bring in front of you. But that was just something I wanted to kind of get up in front of and let everybody know that that's coming down the pipeline here soon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Anything else, Mrs. Fisk?
I have no more items that were listed on the agenda. I do know we have a gentleman from the public here. He's not on the agenda, but it was an item from prior.
Commissioners, do you have any anything that, as a non-agenda item, you'd like to bring forward at this time? Okay. Staff, is there anything that any of you would like to bring forward at this time? Okay. If there's a person here that wants to speak this evening, we'd welcome them to the podium. I'd ask that you state your name clearly into the microphone and your address.
My name is Colin Stanglin, 625 6th Street West in West Fargo. To Mayor Dardis and the commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to come before you to discuss something that is near and dear to my heart. As you probably already realize, with all of the email correspondence and videos and pictures that I've sent to all of you over the last few months. I grew up in West Fargo, and we moved here in 1959, and we lived on River Street, just south of the clinic on 13th there, back in the 60s. My wife and I moved back to West Fargo from Bismarck in 2012 after we retired, and we purchased a home on the river. It didn't take long to see the issues pertaining to the Sheyenne River. These issues were amplified when I was approached by Brady Woodard with the goal, Brady Woodard with Moore Engineering, who is in charge of the snagging and clearing operation, with the goal of getting funds reinstated for the snagging and clearing project. The funds had been cut by the legislature the previous session. With a lot of correspondence and the help of my district legislators, we pushed through that funding. Although this was a positive step in dealing with trees along the river, it does not constitute a comprehensive tree management program within the city. In 2012, the North Dakota Supreme Court issued a decision that basically stated that a property owner of a tree is responsible for that tree. A few notable excerpts from that decision. 1, it is the duty of a landowner to utilize his property in a reasonable manner so as not to cause injury to adjoining property. 2, landowners who allow their property to run wild should not be shielded from liability, while those who maintain and improve their land be subject to liability. And 3, encroaching trees and plants may be regarded as a nuisance when they cause actual harm or pose an imminent danger of actual harm to an adjoining property. A prime example of this decision, of the effects of this decision, is one that I personally had. When we moved into our house, we had 7 large 60-foot, 80-year-old ash trees in our yard. They were due to come out. We removed those over the course of several years because of the cost and what we determined was necessary at the time. My neighbor had several of the same type of trees, but he was not removing his. In 2019, a large branch from one of those trees came down and damaged my new gutters. My neighbor agreed to pay for the damages, but I told him that I would take care of the damage if he would agree to put that money forward to removing the trees in question because of the potential for more damage. He agreed. But before that could be removed, another storm hit, and one of those trees came down in the corner of my house, causing extensive damage. My insurance covered the damage with no increase to my premium, as it is considered an act of God. But I still had a $1,500 deductible to deal with. After discussing this with my neighbor and showing him the North Dakota Supreme Court decision, he agreed to pay the deductible because it could have been a lot worse. I'm not asking the city to get involved in litigation between property owners. Instead, I am asking the city to act in a preemptive manner to avoid issues between property owners. I believe that is a prime responsibility of the city to do so, especially with trees along the river, as that affects almost all of the city population in some degree. I have researched mission statements of other cities in the U.S. All pretty much state the same things. West Fargo's statement is in their Home Rule Charter, Article 3, Section 7. It is lacking what many others have, and I will read one of the more thorough ones in that of Kempner, Texas, and I've abbreviated this to deal with ordinances and nuisances. Establish ordinances to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens, to abate nuisances that impair the quality of life and lower property values. The city already has, West Fargo, already has set precedent in regards to this issue. 9-0401B 44A, the city has ordinances pertaining to the dumping of branches, leaves, grass, clippings, concrete chunks, earth fill, etc. into the river. It also levies fines in regards to these offenses. Also, 9-0406C, paragraph 1, deals with prohibiting restriction of the flow of a natural channel. The Sheyenne River is a natural channel. The city also has a nuisance tree ordinance, 3-0204, pertaining to diseased trees. Whereas if a tree is determined to be diseased, the property owner will be required to remove it. If the property owner does not remove it within a time frame set forth by the city will enter the property and remove it, and the cost of the removal will be assessed against the property, and that is in 3-0205. I contacted 2 other main cities that are situated along the Sheyenne River to see how they dealt with this issue. Lisbon didn't have a specific ordinance addressing trees on private property, but in talking with the Public Works Director, I was informed that they do issue notices, written notices, for removal of trees on private property that are considered a hazard. And they do remove trees along the river that have the potential to fall into the river. Valley City actually has an ordinance that covers all trees. Ordinance 8-06-06 states, all trees and shrubs within the city shall be pruned or removed when such trees or shrubs constitute a hazard to life and property, or harbor insects or diseases which constitute a threat to other trees and shrubs within the city. This ordinance also states, nothing in this chapter shall be deemed to impose any liability upon the city or upon any of its officers or employees, nor to relieve the owner of any private property from the duty to keep trees and shrubs upon private property or under their control in a safe condition. In conclusion, I believe that the city of West Fargo should revise the nuisance clause, the ordinance, to include not only trees along the river, which is my prime concern, but any tree within the city limits which could be deemed a nuisance. The city should establish a criteria other than diseased trees for nuisance trees, one that is simple and clear. I believe the nuisance ordinance should read something to the effect of 3-0204 nuisances. The following conditions are public nuisances whenever they may be found in the city. This includes but is not limited to, and section A would be, any tree, healthy or diseased, living or dead, that is deemed a threat of damage to property, waterways, or other trees. Diseased trees and or trees that have the imminent potential of falling and causing damage or obstruction to adjacent properties, waterways, or municipal facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stangon. Commissioners, any questions?
I guess I just want a clarification on the nuisance trees, what the ordinance says now. Okay, I remember what you wanted to propose, but what does the current one on nuisance trees say?
The current policy right now for West Fargo deals specifically with diseased trees.
Okay.
And I have it here, just a second, I'll read it. Okay, 3-0204 nuisances. The following conditions are public nuisances whenever they may be found in the city. A, any living or standing elm tree or part thereof infected to any degree with the Dutch elm disease, fungus, ceraticisis, almi, and which harbors any of the elm bark beetles, and there's a number of things that I'm not even going to begin to try to pronounce, or other tree species infected by a disease, invasive species or insect is determined a nuisance.
Okay. So
So-
the ordinance currently is talking about diseased trees, but what you're proposing is one that looks like it might fall over or be a threat is what you want the change to be.
Say that again, I'm sorry, I didn't.
So you wanted to expand it beyond just diseased trees is what you're looking for?
I wanted to, just pretty much just like what Valley City stated, is that any tree within the city limits that is deemed, whether it's a hazard or a nuisance, we have a nuisance clause in West Fargo, so that's why that would be the most reasonable, easiest way to change or to adjust, to revise, would be for that clause to be revised to include all trees that would be deemed a nuisance. And the nuisance, you know, I read what I thought it should be. It can be, of course, the people that are more involved with that, you know, City Works, the forester, would be the people that would determine that. One of the things that North Dakota Supreme Court ruling stated that was very interesting, because they went through, and I think I sent that to everybody and you received that. If you read that, it showed where they took excerpts from decisions from multiple states. One of the states, I think it was Wisconsin, and I do have it here, but I'll just ad-lib a little bit on it. They were concerned that, and this was on the liability side, it was not about this here tree removal. But they were afraid that by agreeing to that a person was liable for that tree and for the damage it caused, that there would be an explosion of liability suits. And they found that was not the case. One of the things that I can see where people are concerned about here is that they say, well, you can't include every tree, because if you do, you're going to end up with this just a headache. And I've had this discussion with Brady Woodard also, because I had him down there when we were talking about going over these and stuff. I don't think that's going to happen, and I can't imagine that you're going to have all sorts of people coming up and saying that, you know, I want all these trees removed now, or it should be a nuisance. Because it would have to be someone, City Works, forester, that would have to determine if it is a nuisance.
I was wondering that as
And I don't think, you know, the only people that would be is, for me, if I had a tree that I felt was in imminent coming down on my house again, which now I don't have to worry about that, they're gone. I should make a note also that my neighbor, right after that tree fell on my house, within a week, he had 5 trees taken down because he was worried they were going to come down on his house, because he had several of them in the front yard that were going to come down. So, and then he took the other 2 out this summer, which were kind of had a bullseye on our house, and so now we're tree-free as far as the big ones. So I think that you're not going to have a big issue. If there's someone that really has a concern, yes, they should be coming to the city, and they should be saying, I have a tree that I'm concerned about that is not on my property. I have no recourse. And the North Dakota Supreme Court ruling stated, North Dakota Supreme Court ruling stated, and that was in Herring versus Lisbon Partners, that if the property owner that has that tree does not take care of that tree, does not prune it, does not try to remove dead branches, and that tree does cause damage to another property, then the person who owns that tree is liable. So I'm trying to circumvent that. I would like to see this addressed before it's an issue. And you know my issues that I have across the river from me. You also saw what happened to Rodney Loberg's property. He has, I would say, an estimate to $50,000 to $75,000 worth of damage to his property because that tree went down. And I do have additional pictures of that sandbar, that bar that was caused by that tree coming down and on the other side of the river and forced the river onto his property. So that's what I'm trying to address to circumvent those situations. And that's why I'm here today.
I've been in the Loberg's backyard. I used to own the house immediately to the north. I was
sir.
their next-door neighbor.
Yep.
So I am well aware of the damage that has occurred on their riverbank, and it's tragic.
And in the last year, it's been tenfold.
Yes, sir. Commissioner?
Just two examples that I have, more as it relates to safety, but, 2 summers ago, there were a lot of ash trees in West Fargo that split. The trunks literally split apart, and you'd see them like separate in the wind. I know multiple people that paid to have different, trees taken out because of that issue. That certainly does seem like something that should be you know, if it's not in our ordinance, it should be. And so I could agree from that perspective. And I know even just last summer, a person about half a block from me finally took out a tree. I mean, it was this big, huge, tall, towering, bleached white remnant of a tree that had to have been dead for 10+ years.
I know the tree you're talking about.
And it was finally taken out last summer. Another great example of where, you know, it goes, to me, even beyond nuisance to the point of truly being a safety issue. I guess I would ask that we maybe push this to, you know, our forestry department to come back with maybe a recommendation as to something. I don't know.
I'd actually be open to this. This was pretty interesting to me to hear it and then compare what it currently says versus what other cities say. And I think you make some really good points, actually. And then when you say, you know, at first I'm thinking, oh, if the neighbors can just tattle in each other and say, oh, well, you have a nuisance tree. I'm like, I don't know. But then when you're like, no, it's got to be like Public Works or Forestry or somebody like in the know to declare that, yes, that is a nuisance tree. I think that makes sense, actually. So
That's a vague term, a nuisance, because it could, that tree, a windstorm could come through and break a branch off that's 100 feet away and land somewhere over here. You can't stop that. That's Mother Nature. And that dead tree probably wouldn't go down in a storm because a live tree will have all the weight from the leaves and everything, and it's more bendable. I'm just,
Eventually it falls over.
eventually it falls over because it rots from the base. The branches probably won't fall unless they're diseased and all rotted up there. So to me, we're getting into too much of control over private property. It'd be just like us going in and telling somebody, your shingles are bad. That's a nuisance because they may fall off, and now you have to go out, we have to have somebody from the city come out and declare that and then make them reshingle. That's basically what we're doing if we open a can of worms here.
I think safety is different than nuisance.
Safety, but it's still, it's a safety issue.
And there's a line there.
Yeah, I know, but it's really a fine thing, and I don't know if we want to go there too.
Can I make a
Yes,
point,
sir.
please? On your point there, Mr. Olson, maybe to a degree that's possible, or what you're saying as far as, you know, because it's on private property, but we do have the precedent already. You know, I mean, we already tell them that it's on private property that they have to have their firewood up 6 inches off the ground. They have to have, or they can't throw stuff into the river already. There's ordinances. Ordinances are to protect the populace. And so this is a very crucial episode of that it needs to be addressed. You know, the tree falling down or the branch blowing, that's one thing. If it's not near the property, if it, like you said, if it went, you know, 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, that's one thing. That would be an act of God, and there's not much you can do about that. But
What happened to your house was.
right,
God.
but when it's right beside you and they're not being taken care of, if they're trees that need to be removed, like on these trees that I'm talking about, they are long past their prime. They're 80 years old. When I cut those down, I checked them. They're 80 to 90 years old, these ash trees. They're 60-some feet high, and they're dropping branches like you wouldn't believe. And if your neighbor is not taking care of them, then what are you supposed to do? Wait for it to come down your house? That's when someone gets killed, because the one tree that we just got taken out this summer, finally, it was big, and had so many branches on it, and if it went down, which it was northwest winds usually, west winds, and if that came down in the house, it would split the house. It was so big. It was huge. And so those trees have to be, you know, looked at. And someone has to determine if they're a nuisance.
I see a difference being too, if it's just shingles, it affects your house, your property. But if it's a tree that could fall on your next door neighbors and potentially kill somebody, then that is a public safety issue. So I think there is a difference.
We'd have to look at manpower, all that stuff, and it would cost extra bodies to put on to monitor these trees, and I have to be complaint driven, and I think Tina wants somebody.
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. You could certainly add it as a nuisance to the ordinance. It would be an expansion of the authority you've previously given to staff, because now you would be giving staff the authority to go in, designate a tree to be a nuisance, order the abatement. If it's not abated, then you can go in and specially assess it. The city's never really given that authority at that level to abate what I understand. The case that is being referenced was actually what's referred to as a private nuisance case between two private property owners. When you get the government involved, it becomes designating it as a public nuisance, which means that you activate all of the machinery of government, which gives us the authority to go in and abate it. That's a policy decision for you. What I would say is that there will be costs involved in that. And if you're gonna have an ordinance, you should probably, fund it to enforce it. I don't know what the costs involved in it would be. Those are all policy decisions. It's certainly something we could do, but I think it's a broader policy question about what authority do you want to grant to staff and how much funding are you going to set aside for that? And while I understand the statement that, well, I don't think too many people will call into it, one of the biggest things that I get calls from in my office is private disputes between neighbors. And they want the city attorney to get involved and take a side on their private dispute. And my response is always, that's a private matter between you two property owners. The city doesn't fund those sorts of disputes. And so I think there would be some people complaining about neighbors' trees, right or wrong. And so there will be some cost involved in it. I'm sure the staff was willing to look at it and bring a report back, but those are just some of my initial comments. Those are all policy-driven comments.
Yeah, this is an interesting discussion for sure, and a dilemma, because the city of West Fargo, as the Sheyenne River runs through it, that is controlled by, help me, John, Cass,
Southeast Cass.
Southeast Cass Water has the authority of the river channel. We don't. So here's what I'd like to suggest that we do this evening. Mr. Stangland, if you'd be willing to share your research with your notes and comments that you have and provide those to Mrs. Fisk, our city administrator, and then we'll consult obviously with the attorney, with the forestry department and those folks. And at some point in time, I would hope that they would invite you to a meeting and include one or two of us commissioners. We can't have any more than two in a room or get our fingers slapped. So, or we can do a public meeting as well. But if you'd share all your research that you've had with staff, that'd be greatly appreciated, because you've obviously been engaged in this for a while, because we've been all, receiving your correspondence, and I don't want to make light of that. I appreciate that. I mean, you are a very committed individual to rectify what you consider a problem, and that's great to have citizen engagement like that. So that's where I'd like to suggest that we go with that. And just to review it, if the legalities and the Cass Rural Water Cass Water Authority, if we're wandering into ground that we're not welcome at, then we'll share that with you. Doesn't hurt to have the dialogue.
I would just say, are we setting a precedence if we have a private citizen in with us when we're writing policy and all that?
Well,
Or would that be,
we're not going to write any policy. I think we're going
or
to,
even reviewing it and all that? I'm just wondering are we opening up the doors for everything else? I'm just curious.
that's a good point.
I'm
if
okay
that's-
with that, though, if we are. So I think private citizens, if you're passionate about something, should be involved in changing the process.
I don't
I
see
think
how,
the commission is the process to do that, rather than in a private meeting between.
this is a little out of the ordinary that Mr. Stangl is appearing on us with a non-agenda item. You're right, Commissioner Olson. But out of courtesy to him, he's been corresponding with us. This isn't the first night we've heard about it. We've been hearing about this for a couple months. Yeah. So, but I'll respect, if that's the way you feel about it, then that's just fine. That the staff do us a preliminary report first and/or legal, I'm totally cool with that too. I just want this gentleman to know that, that the time that he's spent on reaching out to us has not been in vain, that we should sit here and have a conversation about it. You might not get the resolution that you want, but the fact of the matter is, we should provide you with an opportunity to share your thoughts. Sorry, that's the way I feel about it. That's okay? So that's where we're at. Again, we'll leave it up to you as to whether or not you share anything.
I will be happy to.
We will rely on legal and staff for, most of the decisions that we make. that's an important part of what we do here.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Stengel.
thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue? All right, Commissioner George, can you help me?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. We're adjourned.